Welcome to Enlightened Omnivore, the monthly podcast that serves up a delicious mix of food, sustainability, and travel. I'm your host, Steve Sabaker, here to explore the wonders of mindful eating. Get ready to expand your palate and your mind, one bite at a time. Hey everybody, welcome back to Enlightened Omnivore. Today I'm chatting with Tyler Dolly of Big Bluff Ranch, a third-generation California chicken rancher. After graduating from college with a degree in literature, Tyler returned home to the 4,000-acre ranch to grow it into one of the West Coast's leading regenerative chicken operations. From processing birds in his mom's stock pot to now raising more than 45,000 chickens a year, Tyler's story is not just about scaling. It's about reimagining what regenerative agriculture can be. We'll dig into Big Bluff Ranch's unique model. We'll talk a lot about regenerative agriculture, and we'll uncover what free-range and pasture-raised really means. So let's get started. Thanks for coming to Enlightened Omnivore, Tyler.
Oh, yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
So can you paint us a picture of Big Bluff Ranch? What makes this location in the California foothills so special?
Absolutely nothing except for the fact that it's us. So
come on, I've seen it. It's beautiful. Tell us what it looks like.
Okay, fine. I'll wax poetic here for a little bit. So we're about 2 hours north of Sacramento in the Sacramento Valley. We are on the west side of the valley in the foothills of the Yola-Boli mountain range. So we're backing up into the Mendocino National Forest. The lower elevation of the ranch is oak woodland savanna, somewhat gentle rolling hills, but we're still kind of steep. And then the back half of the ranch transitions up into the chaparral belt with pretty steep and rugged country. And so we're in this cool transitional period where we get hills, pretty steep hills and big valleys. And then we also get the oak woodland savanna. So we have big valley oaks all over the place, lots of open grasslands in between. When Grandpa bought the ranch in 1960, he bought it pretty far away from everywhere. So we're 25 miles west of Red Bluff, which doesn't sound like very much, but our nearest neighbor is 3 miles away, and the next neighbor is 7 miles away.
Yeah, I got to come and visit Tyler earlier this fall, and it's a long drive down a long, bumpy washboard dirt road. So I felt like I was pretty far out there when I arrived, but beautiful spot. And actually, it's really funny because Tyler, you and I have been orbiting each other for a long, long time. We actually went to college right down the street from each other in Claremont at one of the Claremont colleges. You went to CMC, right? Yep. And I went to Pomona. How does that the rivalry is still strong?
It still runs strong. I don't care.
How does the son of a poultry farmer end up at CMC in the first place, and then get back to the ranch after? I thought farm kids normally ran away from the farm when they went to college, not right back to it. So tell us that story.
Yeah, I'm a really dumb farm kid. So I ended up at CMC because my uncle wanted to be an admiral in the Navy.
There's no water around CMC. They don't have any.
Yeah, it doesn't really clarify anything for you, does it? But my dad's brother wanted to get into the Navy. He didn't actually do it, but at the time when he was going into college, he wanted to get into the Navy, and various things happened where the family moved back to Boston briefly. So my dad went to high school at a private school in Boston, and when it was time for him to go to college, that his grades were adequate but not amazing. And CMC is a relatively new college, and the admissions guy or the guidance counselor at my dad's high school knew Claremont McKenna, and they're like, hey, this guy, this Frank, this kid, he's good, just take him. And they're like, okay. And so that's how my dad got into CMC. Because
so you were a legacy.
I am a legacy. Yes, I am a legacy. And so not only am I a legacy myself, both my sisters went to CMC, and I have a cousin who went to Scripps. I have an uncle who went to Harvey Mudd, and I think I've got some sort of relative went to Pomona too. So it's kind of a weird thing, but all of a sudden when we start digging into it, it's like my family basically goes to the five colleges. It's like, oh, that's
Yeah,
weird.
so for my listeners, the Claremont colleges, there's five undergraduate. They're all within walking distance. I mean, literally across the street
Yeah.
from each other. Sometimes you can't even tell when one campus ends and the other begins. So you left the farm to go to CMC. Lots of family had been there. It's a liberal arts college. There's not an ag department. What was the motivation and what did you study?
I got my degree in literature because I didn't know what else to do. I liked reading books. I was like, well, I can do that. I can read books. And also I was fairly cunning in the fact that I looked at all of the major requirements and that the lit degree had the fewest requirements. So I had the most electives. So I took all sorts of fun classes. I took classes at every college except for scripts. So the five colleges are kind of based on Oxford. Is that right? Is Oxford has a
Sure.
group of
I've heard
colleges?
that. I don't know. Maybe that's, a little bit complimentary.
Yeah. So, anyways, because these colleges are so close together, they're so intertwined that you can take classes at other colleges and they count for your degree. So I was able to. I took a ancient civilization class at Pomona. I took a gardening class at Pitzer. So that was the that was the so the
That's the
reason I
most
went to see
ag you had at
that was the
at the
most egg I
Claremont
had, and it
colleges was a
I have
gardening
this
class.
very yeah.
Well, that's
I
funny
was
because I studied ancient history at Pomona, so we probably were in a class together. We
I
both
only took one, yeah. So the professor was actually really he was I can't remember his name. All I really remember he was kind of hip and he had a souped up pickup truck and he was the only guy. And because I came from Red Bluff and pickup trucks, I know pickup trucks. It's not like I'm a gearhead or anything, but I'm like, hey, cool, dude, you got a. I don't even remember. It was like some sort of 1500, and he like had done stuff to it, and it was very basic, and I could tell. And he's like, oh wow, cars. This is amazing. All these stupid other kids, they don't know anything. And so we talked trucks for a little bit, and I was like, this is really weird.
So did your literature degree serve you well when you came back to Big Bluff Ranch?
So this is that's an interesting question because my daughter just went to she's in eighth grade. She went to high school, some sort of high school indoctrination, not indoctrination, but whatever overview. And somehow they talked about we're already talking about college degrees. And she's been saying for ages that she's going to come back to the ranch. And I'm like, maybe, I would love if she did. Totally would love if she did, but not planning for it or banking on it. And so she went to this college overview and she's like, wow, I just learned of this really cool business major. It's called ag business. I'm going to do that. I was like, because I need to be able to run the business of the ranch when I get out of college. I was like, oh, that's amazing. And so my wife and I have, it's mostly a joke on my side of the conversation, an argument about the utility of a liberal arts degree. She got an engineering degree, a very kind of technical degree, and it served her very well. And I got a liberal arts degree. And I keep making the argument that the the thing that you learn at college is how to learn and how to communicate. And so your actual degree does not matter nearly as much as the kind of software drilled into your brain. So for instance, if you're reading a book, or even more annoyingly, if you're reading a poem and you have to write a 15-page paper on it, and it's like, 5 paragraphs long, like, how are you going to take the knowledge like distilled down into this poem? Like, you're going to be pulling out words, you're going to come up with the theme, you're going to have to support your theme and come to a conclusion. And so the thing with the type of regenerative agriculture we do is there's not really a blueprint. There's not a step A, step B, step C equals Z, right? Which, not that industrial agriculture is that simplistic either, but it is more developed than what we do. So we do tons and tons of pasture poultry, and I had to figure out how to do that. So I read, dozens of pasture poultry books. I've read all of the mainstream conventional broiler production manuals, and you end up with like this stupid brain full of like weird random chicken facts, and you have to decide what is useful and what is not, what applies to us, what doesn't. And then as your system evolves, you have to remember all these little details and be like, oh, that thing now matters. That thing now comes to the fore. And so that is what I got out of my lit degree, is that the ability to consume a lot of information, synthesize it, repeat it so other people understand what's going on, and then communicate that understanding to other people. And so we kind of skipped over the fact that when I went to college, I didn't actually plan to come back to the ranch. It was only by leaving the ranch that I knew that this is where my, it's a little silly, but it's not really. This is kind of where my soul resides. This is me. And
Yeah. Yeah, and
so
I feel like that is such a common story of my ranch and farm friends where I mean literally it's a very spiritual, emotional connection to the land. And because this is not an easy job, right? Like and you're not getting abundantly wealthy at it. And
yep.
you're taking a lot of risks and spending a lot of money to keep it going. So for my listeners who aren't familiar, tell us a little bit about. Let's start talking about chicken.
Oh boy.
What do you guys? So you guys have about a 4,000 acre ranch, and you started the chicken program, didn't you?
Yep. Yeah. So it didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, just the 30-second background is that my mom's dad bought the ranch in 1960, and this was kind of so we have to go all the way back to 1960 to figure out why we're grazing chickens in 2024. So grandpa bought the ranch, and at the time this was meant for him, for a weekend ranch for him. He was an industrialist in the Bay Area and making a pretty good chunk of money, and the ranch was just his getaway, his wannabe whatever John Wayne thing. And that's actually why we are called Big Bluff Ranch, because he told Graham that he was going to buy a ranch and become a rancher, and she said, "You're not. You're bluffing yourself." So he bought the ranch, brought her up, and he said, "Hey, Graham, here you go. Here's the big bluff. Ha ha ha!
Surprise!
Surprise! I did it, and it's still here. However, whatever, 60 some odd years later. So when Grandpa was in charge, he was just writing checks and just doing whatever he wanted to do, and it was fine. And then my parents, through a kind of series of weirdness, ended up here at the ranch for a summer, the summer of '76, and they haven't left. And in the '80s, my dad all of a sudden had kind of unplanned became the ranch manager. And he's like, whoa, wait a second. I went to CMC. I grew up sailing. Like, I'm not a rancher boy. I don't understand what's going on. And so he went to one of Alan Savory's very first talks. And so Alan Savory is the godfather of holistic management, the godfather of regenerative agriculture, we call it these days. And back in 1982 or whatever it was, he was just considered a fringe lunatic. It was not he did not have the esteem that he has today. But what he talked about made a lot of sense to my dad, that animals should be managed in a natural way. That if you think about the wildebeest in the Serengeti, that they're in big clumps and they're moved often, and that he's like, oh, that makes sense. That's how, yeah, okay, let's do that. And so we built fences through the 80s, messed with our animal, matched our animal genetics to our landscape in the 90s. When I graduated in 2000, at that point was the beginning of grass-fed beef. We're getting to chickens, don't worry, they haven't gone away. And so the grass-fed beef has no real commodity value. We can grow grass-fed beef, you take it to the auction yard and you get commodity prices, or worse, because they don't fit the commodity target. So the only way, if you're going to go grass-fed beef, is you have to direct market it. And when you're direct marketing in 2000, this is very early. People are like, I don't understand grass-fed beef. We're not used to being direct marketed or beef. We're not used to buying it in bulk. We don't understand. So we did 10 years of grass-fed beef. We still have cows, but it's not really our thing anymore. And
can we talk a little bit about that? I know that, and I've talked about beef a few times on the podcast, but when you said that grass-fed beef and grass-finished beef basically is what we're talking about here, it's still sold at commodity prices. That's because the majority of the meat industry is built on small ranchers raising yearling steer or cattle for a year out on pasture and then bringing them to a feedlot, feeding them on corn, and then that's the finished product that's then processed in the 95 to 98% of the beef business. What you were trying to do was, rather than go from the grass fed first year, you continued to finish them on grass. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
And so the commodity market doesn't want that. So they're not going to pay for it. So there's no way for you to sell it to them. So then you have to sell it yourself.
Yep. 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 And even still, that's mostly true. There are now programs that you could sell into, a grass-fed beef you could sell into a program like that. But still, the grass-fed beef industry, although it's much more mature than it was when we were kind of playing in it, it's still not an easy. Agriculture ranching is just not easy, but we always like to choose the hard mode. Like we never choose the easy thing. So
then how did you get to chickens?
So I was wrapping up the story. So the one tenet that a lot of farmer market people espouse is the idea that it is easier to sell more stuff to a one customer than it is to find more customers for one thing. So if you go to a grass-fed beef booth at your farmer's market, you're very likely going to see, especially over time, that they're going to have beef, they're going to have lamb, they're going to have chicken, because the hard part is getting someone to come buy from you in the first place. And that once they've done that, you want to keep getting their money more and more and more. And so we followed that. We did lamb, we did goat, we did some pasture pork, and then we tried chicken in like 2007 or something like that. And we're like, oh no, this is bad. New rule, 4 legs only. Like, oh my God, chicken. we didn't handle that very well.
What was the pain point? Like, why?
Well, okay. So here's the thing. So even though, as much as I was kind of saying it is hard to sell grass-fed beef into the commodity market, you can do it. You can take your steers to the auction yard and just sell them. That's done. If you want to sell the meat, you can go to a USDA slaughterhouse and get them processed. That's doable. The thing with chickens, especially if you're only doing a small number of them, you have to kill them and process them yourselves. And that there is equipment you can buy, but if you're doing 30, you're not going to go buy a couple grand worth of equipment to help you do the processing, the plucker and the scalder and all the stuff that makes life a lot easier. I can't believe we did this. So the only way, or the best way to pluck a chicken is to dunk them into a pot of hot scalding water. And that kind of loosens the skin and loosens the fat that holds the root of the feather. And, you can
for my listeners, after they've been
they're dead,
expired. We're not dipping them in scalding water beforehand.
Oh yeah, chickens have a very distinct smell when they're wet. It's even more distinct when it's a hot wet, and it's even more distinct when it was a hot wet with some chicken manure mixed into it. And when you bring that into your kitchen and you're dunking it in your mom's big stock pot and plucking these chickens in your mom's kitchen, you only get to do that once. But we went back to the market, and as now, many people get into farmer markets, and they are in this more for a lifestyle, or they're not checking their numbers. They're selling it for what their neighbor sells it for, or what the grocery store sells it for. And so they unknowingly drop the bottom of the market below profitability. So
and this is a great point to bring up. And I don't know if a lot of folks understand what you're outlining here, but the race to the bottom in pricing, because so many of my listeners probably go to the grocery store and they see how meat prices are going up and up and up. So they're probably saying, what the heck are you talking about? I know if I buy organic or regenerative, it's going to be 2 or 3x more than if I buy commodity. But the market at small scale, just the efficiencies are so much worse when you're raising 30 or 50 or 70 chickens. For your point, like if you're scalding them in mom's stock pot, that is not an efficient way to do business. It probably took you as long to do 30 or 40 birds as it would to do, 100 with appropriate equipment and staff. So, but that was how long ago was that when you did it in the stock pot? Was
Yeah,
that
that was like 2006,
yeah,
something
so
like that.
you've been doing this for 20 years almost.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's scary.
Sorry, didn't
He
mean to
was,
age you there, but
yeah, he aged me pretty quick. I just saw some gray hair pop up.
and
Uh,
you guys, but what you guys do now, let's talk about now. What you
okay.
guys do now that's really compelling is you're one of the few regenerative certified organic and corn and soy free
And air,
raised poultry in California, right?
and we're air chilled. So yeah, so we did those 30 head. We went to the farmers market to try and sell our other meats. It wasn't working without going into the whole economic things that even though you're paying a lot more for meat at farmers markets, generally speaking, you are not paying a living wage to the farmer at that price.
That's
That
right.
generally speaking, you need to add 20 or 30% to that, whatever you paid to like even get close to what the farmer should make. And if you're a smart farmer, you're like, I ain't playing that game. That's losing money. And that's not that we're smart, but that was what we saw. We're like, we can't play that game. And we ended up through a weird set of circumstances. I went to a conference. I met a guy who could sell more chicken than he could raise. I could raise more chicken than I could sell. It was like, boom, great. Now we're chicken farmers and we are contract growers and we're raising lots of chickens for other people. And so that started off from, we skipped a couple steps here, but it doesn't. We went from like 1,800 head a year of on-farm processing. We had bought the equipment. We didn't hire people. We burnt out all of our friends and family. We figured out USDA processing, and we grew from 600 head a week in 2009. And this year we're going to do about 45,000 chickens. We did 600 turkeys, and that puts us, I mean, there's no real statistics, but that puts us in the top two or three producers on the West Coast.
That's impressive. And let's talk a little bit about how you raise these birds and what distinguishes them from other local small scale, because although you're big for your market, that's I mean, we're not talking Perdue or commodity size, right? I mean,
No, we're
45,000 chickens a year is impressive. But that I imagine Perdue probably does that in a week.
oh no, Perdue does that in like a couple hours.
A couple hours. Yeah, there we go.
Right.
So that gives the
So
scale.
so yeah, I mean, so Mary's Chickens here on the West Coast is kind of the mainstream commodity organic kind of standard bearer, and I'm pretty sure they do well over 1 million birds a week, and they're small. They're not. They could be bought by Purdue if they wanted to type deal.
Wow. A
So
million a week.
oh yeah, and that's not big. That's not big. It's in when you start kind of looking into the numbers of the just the when you look at the industrial meat industry at scale, the numbers are mind-boggling. It's just millions and billions, and it's so huge.
And
It's
so when we're talking about these, there's commodity production, that we've mentioned a couple names, Purdue, Tyson. These are some of the big players where they're doing millions of birds every week. They're raising these chickens indoors.
right.
They're providing them, a feed ration of corn or soy pellet or crumble, which is basically just milled feed, and then they're really not getting or moving around a lot, right?
No. Yeah. So what we do is we do pasture raised. So one of the kind of the creator of the pasture poultry movement is a guy named Joel Salatin, and he's kind of got this saying where let animals be animals. So let a pig be a pig, let a chicken be a chicken. And what he's trying to say in that is to look at the animal itself and understand what innate characteristics it wants. So like a pig wants to be able to root, a chicken or a cow wants to be able to graze grass. Part of the problem with just a quick side note, part of the problem with feedlots is that when they go into a feedlot, they're fed corn, and corn, which is just the seed of a grass, is not what a cow is designed to eat. They have this big rumen that's designed to ferment the grass, the leaves and the stalk of corn. That's what a cow is designed to eat, or evolved, designed, whatever. And so when you look at letting a cow be a cow, when you put a cow into a feedlot, that's not letting that cow be a cow. That is bastardizing what the best and highest use of that animal is. And so when you get around to look at chickens, you're like, well, a chicken wants to be outside. It wants to be able to scratch on the ground. It wants to be able to chase bugs. It wants to, feel the wind, see the sun, see the moon, all that sort of stuff. But when you raise chickens like that, that is not meeting their genetic growth potential. So, what a commodity chicken guy is trying to do is they're trying to take a commodity of corn, which is artificially cheap because of the farm bill. That's a whole different issue.
That's another
But
podcast.
that's a whole another podcast. So the vast majority of the Midwest corn is all meant for animal consumption. You can't eat that directly. That's not human food. So you need to convert that corn into something that humans can eat. And chickens and hogs, but mostly chickens, just so happen to be insanely efficient at converting corn into a protein that humans can eat. And so that is the chicken's main job, is to take a cheap commodity and turn it into something that we can eat and a value add to it. And so conventional guys, they work on, it's a billions of dollar industry, but they're making pennies a pound. So they have to be super efficient and super, super dialed in. Like, it's mind boggling how precise they have to be to make money at this game. And so the only way they can be that precise is they put them in a barn. They control the lights, they control the temperature, they control the feed, they control everything, because through billions of dollars of experimentation, they know that I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but they do know these things, that chickens need 5,000 Kelvin light for 18.6 hours a night. And on day 28, they need 16.2 hours of light. They can dial it down to that little tiniest little bits. And they can grow these chickens from, like, they show up at, I don't know, 2 or 3 ounces, and they harvest them at 5 or 6 pounds live weight. And they can do that in about 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
5 weeks. Yeah, I think my guests would be surprised that what we're saying is that's a 5 week process from
Yep.
when the chick is hatched to when they're harvesting it for meat.
Right. It's insane. It is insane. And that is not a genetically modified organism or anything like that. That is just 50 years of selective breeding and taking advantage of the fact that chicken genetics are pretty darn malleable. Their generation cycles are very short. So you can genetically select really quickly. So that's conventional guys. They have them in barns. They control the environment. They grow them very fast, very efficient, mind-bogglingly good at that. But it's not really honoring the spirit of the animal, the innate characteristics of an animal. When they're in the barn, there is no sun, there's no wind, there's no bugs, there's no dirt, there's no nothing. It's a barn. There are some upsides done well. There are some upsides to that production model, but we do a different thing, which is what Joel Salton kind of started, which is pasture raised. So we have them in little hoop houses out on pasture, meaning they're out on grass, that they're outside all of the time. They get bugs, they get grass, they get the sun, they get the hot, they get the cold. They have all of the environmental cues that stimulate all of their instinctual desires, right? When a bird flies over, they get to run into the hoop to hide. They have a little bit of a fright, but okay, now I'm okay. Like, they have excitement in their life. They're like, oh, look, there's a grasshopper, and they chase after him for like 30 feet. So they get a little bit of exercise, and they're like, oh, now I'm cold. It's bedtime. And they all come under their hoops and they huddle up and next to each other and they snuggle up and like, oh, it's bedtime, and they sleep. And so that's what pasture raised means. That's true pasture raised. But it's harder to do. So conventional guys are 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on what sort of weights they're trying to hit. The fastest we can grow our birds is like 7 weeks at a minimum. So, and we have the exact same genetics. We feed no corn, no soy. That's a little bit of a slower growing ration, but really that slower growth is letting that animal take the energy from its food and do it for something other than getting fat. It's like, oh, I need to cool myself off. Oh, I need to stay warm. Oh, I'm going to chase that bug. oh, I'm going to run around in circles. Oh, I'm going to scratch. I'm going to, they're doing stuff with their life and their body.
And
And
that results in better flavor, doesn't it?
right. So as the age equals flavor. So as we are getting older, you and I are both becoming more and more flavorful.
More tasty. All
More
right.
tasty. Yeah.
I might be
So,
becoming fatter too. I don't know. So
yeah. Well, it doesn't, the metaphor doesn't hold all the way through. So here's the thing. I don't do it very often, but I will eventually sometimes have to eat store-bought chicken. And I don't know about anyone else. You probably don't have anything to compare it to, but when I eat store-bought chicken, like it's mushy. I go mush, mush. There's just like protein mush in my mouth. And then, most of the time we're eating our chicken. It's like it is not mush. Certainly it's not, it's firm. I don't know, there's some like bite to it. There's something that there's something in your mouth that you're like, yes, I'm eating meat, not just mush.
this is a great point to bring up because I think a lot of folks, when they buy chicken at the store, and they'll notice, especially if it's breast meat, right? If it's white meat, they'll notice texture right away.
Right.
And you don't notice the texture as much in dark meat. And that's because that muscle gets a lot of exercise. So, what you're talking about is that when the chickens aren't restricted and they can basically exhibit their natural behaviors and be more active in a pasture raised environment, that's going to impart flavor and texture quality to the meat. And when you're tasting this breast meat of a chicken that's been confined or stuck in a barn or doesn't have to move very far because its food is right in front of it, then that meat isn't going to have the same taste and texture that we prefer. And I find it fascinating when I hear people, who are not dark meat lovers. I don't know. Do you have this conversation at your house? I have this happen all the time. It's my wife still is the only one who demands white meat, but I have converted every other member of my family to eating some dark meat on occasion. And now I don't have any dark meat left. I have to eat the white meat because I've done such a good job of convincing them that they all reach for the thighs and the
Right.
legs and the wings, and I'm stuck with a little hunk of chicken tofu, basically.
Right. Right. Yep.
But to talk more about, okay, that the difference between conventional and pasture raised, and can you talk a little bit about how that pasture raised claim is being clarified right now?
So the USDA says a label claim is something that you put on the label, and that real estate on the package is a well-regulated area of the government. What goes on that label has a lot of regulatory oversight. So you can't just claim pasture raised and slap it on your label, the actual label that goes on your actual packaging. That has to go to the USDA and get certified and accepted. So when you think of the normal claims like organic or free range or no antibiotics ever,
Cage free.
cage free, vegetarian fed, these are all regulated terms that somehow have gone to the USDA, and the USDA has a set of standards that you demonstrate you meet them, and they're like, sweet, you can put that on your label and you're good to go. Pasture raised, as of this exact moment, does not have a USDA standard. So if you come across a chicken that is claimed to be pasture raised, it's on the label itself. As of right now, there is no definition for that. Just whatever the company decided to say it was pasture raised. And you think you're like, oh, sure, whatever, pasture raised, it's got to be on grass. Well, you would think that, but you'd be wrong, because the reality is that most of the conventional commercial chicken, I'm talking like stuff you're finding at the grocery store at a pretty large scale. This is not the farmer market people. That if they're saying pasture raised on their label, they just wrote up their own standard. And pretty much what they did is they will have copied their free range marketing or their free range standard. They're like, oh, cool, free range. Well, maybe that's not as good as pasture raised, but it's free range. It's got to be good. Well, here's the thing, people. Yeah, I got schmucked again, because what happened is that these big guys saw that people would pay more for free range. They have the money to go help the USDA come up with these definitions. They're helping. and they have the money and the lobbyists and they have the lawyers and the whoever have to write up, hey USDA, we know that you're working really hard and you don't have time to figure out what free range should be, so here's our definition of free range, just take it, it's fine, it's good, you don't have to do anything. And so lo and behold, that's kind of what happens. The USDA takes a definition from the industry and it's like, okay, free range. So what they've done is that you think free range, you think red barn, green grass, white chickens, farmers in overalls, and the chickens are just la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di. But that's not at all what the standard actually is. The standard is a few doors that will open up to the outside and that the birds can be kept inside to like 4 or 5 weeks of age because of biosecurity. Now, you remember we just talked about how fast these birds grow to maturity. That means that those outside doors, which actually don't go to grass, they go to like a gravel dirt lot with some fences around it and probably roof over the top. It is not outside. It is not grass. It is not every bird is going outside, because chickens are creatures of habit. They want tomorrow to be like yesterday. And so by the time they're 3-4 weeks old, like, they've kind of got life figured out. And if they've lived in a barn the whole time and you open up a door, they're like, that's not, no. So some go outside, don't get me wrong, some go outside. But if you're looking at a barn that's holding 20 to 30,000 chickens, which is not unusual at all, and you're looking at an outside area of probably a few thousand square feet, like, there's no room literally no room. All the birds could not go outside if they wanted to.
Right.
And so free range, while it sounds great that the big guys set the standard so low, basically they're preying on the consumers' ignorance isn't the right word, expectations of what free range would be. Free range sounds free and they're ranging and it's big and it's open, and it's not. It's absolutely not.
Basically, free range means there's a door out to a parking lot, and once you're 4 or 5 weeks old, after being inside and kept nice and warm and well fed, if you'd like to go outside that door and explore, you can, but we're only going to open it right before we're about to process you anyway. So
Yeah,
that's free range. So that's free range. Now, pasture raised has, to your point, doesn't have a standard yet, but I think the USDA just submitted a new definition for it. And I've heard from other pasture raised ranchers that this is an improvement, that they're happy with it.
Yeah. I am not hip on all of the latest developments and all of the specifics of it. I do know the guy who's kind of been like leading the charge on it, and I trust what he's doing. Is it going to be the perfect definition? No, it never ever is. I mean, the best definition is you buying from someone you know and trust and seeing how they do it.
Well, and I'll put in the article for this month's podcast, the links to the USDA. There's a comment period. It may already be closed, but at least you can see what that definition is. And also, if there's an opportunity for public comment, folks can voice their opinion and share how they'd like to have greater specificity and more encouragement of the kinds of regenerative agriculture that you guys are doing at Big Bluff. So Let's talk about that claim, which is regenerative agriculture. What does that mean in poultry farming?
So,
are we going to have to go back another 60 years?
No. We don't have to go back all 60 years. So regenerative agriculture is kind of at the beginning stages of its self-definition. So everyone basically agrees on what regeneration, everyone agrees on the high level of what regeneration means, which is you are making your landscape healthier. You are sequestering more carbon, you're storing more water, you have more biodiversity, your animals are healthier, if you're farming, your crops are healthier, you no-till, all this sort of stuff. There's very general acceptance on that level. To step down to be a little more detailed as to trying to put numbers on this, like, are you regenerative if you have 1% organic matter, 2% organic matter? Like, there are a number of people organizations promoting standards. They're all more or less good. I'm not, if you see certified regenerative anywhere, that is high quality, but there are differing standards. So,
And that's an
what
important point to make is that although there isn't a total consensus on the definition of regenerative agriculture, I think you'd agree the certification process, this third party audit you're talking about, which is periodic, sometimes once a year, sometimes every couple of years. But these are third party organizations that are basically the police officers of these certifications. And you fill out forms every year for all of these claims. Some of them are just as simple as well, you're not using the free range, but anyone could fill out those forms. But there isn't normally a third party certification process for those kinds of claims. What other than organic and regenerative, is there a third party audit for any of the others?
I don't think so. There are. I just happened to go to a pasture egg conference, and they have third party audits where food safety people show up to check the eggs. Um,
But in general, certification for organic and certification for regenerative are more rigorous, wouldn't you say?
yes, yeah. Those are definitely third party audited situations. When you look at free range, you look at natural, which is the most useless certification ever. If you see natural, just don't. It's not. It's literally meaningless. All of those are just kind of like self claims. There are standards. You just say, hey, we meet them. They don't come and check on you. It's more like if you claim that and you don't do it and you get sued, you can get in trouble. So regenerative agriculture is the practice of using agriculture to regenerate, to put life back into our soil. Agriculture of the past, say, 50, well, past couple hundred years, but really ultimately the past 50-ish, 60-ish years has been essentially extractive, where all of the tilling that you see, all of the fertilizers you hear about, all of these large scale machinery, that whole process really is taking fertility that has been baked into the soil by Mother Nature for millennia and extracting it, just taking it out. Just like, hey, we can get a really good bushels of yield of corn this year, take it out. And that it is a representation of kind of the scientific mindset where there's a single variable, which is yield. All we care about is yield. We don't want to talk about the complexities of why our yield is this.
I think I get what you're saying is basically there's a natural system of maintaining a balance, an equilibrium of the carbon in the soil, the energy that needs to go into the plant production, and then the consumption of that plant production by other animals that then completes the cycle when the animal either poops or dies and then sends its nutrients back into the soil again. The commodity model is only extractive. It's never giving anything back to the soil. It's just taking and taking in the form of multiple yields every year, multiple crops of cereal grains, pumping those up with synthetic fertilizers, destroying the natural microbes in the soil that are holding in the moisture, holding in the carbon, holding in all of that. When it goes from looking like chocolate cake to sand, basically. I mean, I've seen this happen on a friend's in reverse. I've seen this happen on a friend's pasture in the Central Valley. He bought a strawberry farm that was conventionally farmed, and literally the dirt around the house was like moon dust. There wasn't a single plant growing in this field because they cover it in black plastic and pump it full of poisonous gas to kill off the entire microbial system so that they don't get any, strawberries can get, rot or get bugs or get all kinds of things. They're a very delicate product to maintain that look and feel and texture. And so they basically would destroy and kill, gas this soil till there was nothing left in it, and then just put synthetic amendments into it. He came out, planted some grass, some wild grasses, and then started raising cattle on it, and within a year, it looked like chocolate cake. There was no dust, and everything was completely changed back to a more natural environment where we would see what soil might look like in your potted plants, or when you dig up your garden in the backyard that you've been maintaining organically. Like, we've seen the difference. What does a day in the life of Tyler on Big Bluff Ranch look like then? What does regenerative ranching of chicken look like at your farm?
So day to day on Big Bluff Ranch, I have this kind of running joke. Hey, what do you do? I was like, well, I raise chickens and I raise kids. So, and it's only two, but that's plenty of kids. So going back to letting a chicken be a chicken, that is great. That is absolutely necessary. But you can't just be benevolently neglectful to this bird. You can't just like, hey, the chicken knows how to be a chicken. I'm going to throw it out on the pasture and walk away, and it's going to grow itself, and it's going to be the most amazing chicken ever. Chickens have a brain the size of a pea. They have very little intellectual, like if A then B type awareness. I mean, they can get there, but it's not like rocket scientists. What they have is a really well developed set of instincts that keep them alive. So they don't even have to think. A bird flies over. Oh my God, I got to hide. It's a hawk. It's going to eat me. Hey, the sun's going down. Oh, I need to find a place to sleep. And so our job is to create an environment where we can put a chicken out there or in an environment where a chicken can be a chicken and actually survive and thrive and be happy. And that is not just throwing them out there on a bunch of grass and walking away. That there is still a lot of care that we have to give these birds. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to pretend to be a mother hen. So when a hen goes broody, which means she's sitting on a clutch of eggs, they hatch. She's got all these little cute little baby chicks running around, and they get cold. They have no body mass. They have no feathers. They rely 100% on their mother for temperature regulation. And so what happens is she'll kind of sit down and fluff out her wings a little bit, and all these chicks run underneath her wings, and that's how they stay warm for the night. Well, we can't, for 35,000 chickens a year, it doesn't work to have mother hens taking care of them. So we become the mother hens. And I'm not out there sitting on chickens at night. We are providing them a hoop house that's insulated. We are providing them propane heaters that keeping them warm as if their mother was sitting on them. So that is what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, is pretending to be mother chickens, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, pretending to be mother chickens. So for the young birds, that means we're checking on their temperatures. Are they hot? Are they cold? Do we need to open up a door? Do we need to close the door? That even if they are a mother, even if they had a mother hen, they're going to sit on their nest for like a couple, 2-3 days. They're not going to really be zipping around being chickens right away. She's going to keep them right here, get some age on them. They're not going anywhere. So we kind of do that as well. We have them in a brooder 1 to 2 weeks till they get up to kind of a size where they can handle outside temperature swings. Then for the older birds, we're checking on their water, make sure they have water, check on their feed, make sure they have feed, check on this, check on that. And then that is really what we're doing, is we're just stewarding these chickens all day long. We've got 2 full-time guys. We get chicks every couple of weeks, so we're always setting up brooders. We're always moving older equipment around, and that's pretty much it. So we are never really described it that way before, but I guess, yeah, we're just pretending to be mother hens.
Yeah, and I got a chance to come up and visit. And so what I remember is seeing these kind of canvas tents, or tents covered in canvas and plastic that are, metal hoops, so that if you think almost like a Kwanzaa hut, look,
Mhm.
and they're temporary. You can move these, right? And you do move them because they are open to the ground and the grass and the soil below. But you don't move them every day or two. You keep them in that is their home that they can come into when it's too hot or too cold, or when they're ready to sleep or get some food, they can come into that home. But then there's large panels every what, maybe 15 feet or so, 20
20.
feet. Yeah, every 20 feet that are open so that they can come outside. And when I showed up on the farm, I was shocked at where the chickens all were because it was a hot day and there was a leaky pipe and they all found a nice cool drink of water, and they were all piled around this leaky pipe, because I would have been there too. It was like a swimming pool for the day. I think it's a different model than some people would think about if they've heard of pasture raised and seen these chicken tractors that people are moving along, or obviously the commodity model that we talked about. You're kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, so there are two schools of thought in raising pasture poultry. There is our style, which would be called kind of a day range model, where we set up infrastructure for the life of the bird, and the bird just knows that spot very well. And as the older they get, the farther they walk, and the new stuff they find to eat and chew on. They don't chew; they don't have any teeth, but peck on. And then there is the more commonly understood model of daily movement, pasture movements, and these will be in basically cages that get moved forward once or twice a day. And there are pluses and minuses to both ways of raising birds that way. We chose this day range model because it suits our environment, suits our labor force, suits our geography, our context. And it is not, I'm not crazy that there's actually in France, if only we knew someone who goes to France all the time, that they have this poultry certification called Label Rouge, or Red Label, and that this is a high attribute, high quality chicken. And one of their production models is basically what we do. So I didn't know it at the time, but it's kind of convergent evolution. We kind of created the same way, but we are kind of following in the footsteps of giants, that this super high end chicken in France is also raised the same way. So either way it works. The idea is that chickens basically are fertilizing pasture. So as long as you're not over concentrating manure, you're not over impacting the grass has a long time to recover. Either one of these models works.
And what are you feeding these birds? You talked about how it's no soy, no corn.
Yeah. So okay. So this is fun. So the reason why corn and soy is fed to chickens right now, I alluded to it a little bit, is that corn is super cheap because of the farm bill. Again, a whole nother podcast, but the way that the American taxpayers through the USDA has chosen to spend their agricultural tax dollars is, in my opinion, almost morally wrong. And then we feed a lot of soy because soy is also subsidized and it is also abnormally cheap. And so that's why they use corn and soy, because it's super cheap. And that soy is a pretty good protein source for chickens. But the way it's grown is just not good. Now, there are some issues. There are a whole bunch of issues with corn and soy. On a production standpoint, the way conventional corn and soy is grown, I think we all kind of understand, is not super great. There's lots of synthetic fertilizers and synthetic insecticides and bad things. We have lots of runoff. There's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It's something insane. Like, we export 1,000 tons of topsoil a minute every year. It's just mind-boggling that the tens of thousands of years that Mother Nature built up fertility in the Midwest, we're just literally pissing down the Mississippi as fast as we could possibly do it. It's just dumb. Okay, so that is dumb and wrong, and we should come up with a better way. Vote with your food dollars. The other reason it's dumb for me in California is that all of that corn and soy has to come from the Midwest to California, right? So now we have on top of all the petrochemicals we use to grow it and produce it, now we actually have to ship it all the way out here, which is kind of dumb. Then there are growing concerns that people have corn allergies, People have soy allergies. Most conventional corn and soy will very, very likely have GMO components to it, genetically modified components to it. They don't want to be eating that. They feel like they have reactions to that. That is kind of the broad reason why corn and soy is bad. Go
Yeah,
ahead. You have a
like
question.
basically, what do you feed them differently?
See, you asked me the story. You have to go to the backstory
I
first. I
know.
was catching up to the so the reason we feed corn and soy, or we are corn and soy free, is that when I came back to the ranch, our whole point of being on the ranch is to create as much life here as possible. But we are also not unconnected to the rest of the world. That the choices we make here reflect things. So if I choose to feed corn and soy, I know I'm bringing it in from the Midwest. I know I'm supporting GMO, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to do that.
So what do
So
you feed them?
wheat, we feed them wheat. So the cool thing about wheat and or rapeseed meal is the majority of our rations. And so the reason we went with this is that California used to be the world's largest wheat supplier in the late 1800s. We had just gobs and gobs of wheat grown here. We can grow. We have crops that can grow here in California natively without summer irrigation that would feed our chickens, and that what we're feeding now is very close to that ideal state. Because ultimately, the vision that I'm working towards, I doubt we'll ever get there, but the vision is that truly the 100%, the best truly regenerative chicken is that it is grown on the ground that grew the grain. So imagine you have a field, split it down the middle, you grow chickens on one half of that field one year, and you grow grain on the other half. Next year you flopsides. That's super simplistic, but that grain is fed to the animal on the ground that it came from, basically. That if you are bringing grain from any real distance, that's not regenerative. It's going to take a long time for the industry to catch up to that ideal, and we're getting as close as we can there. But that is the ideal. And that's truly a regenerative chicken.
Because I think some folks asked when I had the butcher shop, people would ask us, "Oh, well, are the chickens that are pasture raised, are they just eating the bugs and the grass and
Oh,
the seeds on the ground?" And I said, "No, no, they have supplemental feed because these birds are growing. The genetics of them are make them grow faster, right? Like they've been bred to grow quickly." Much more quickly than a wild chicken, if there's even any such thing.
right.
And so they need more energy, they need more food. And if they were to go around pecking around for food, you'd have some pretty skinny chickens. Because I just did a podcast on foraging with my friend Michelle Dowd, and she talks about how she didn't have very many good memories, fond memories as a child of foraging, because it's tough work to find all your food that you want to eat on the ground or in the trees or in the bushes. And the chickens are the same way. They
Yeah.
they definitely aren't going to have the same growth pattern or the same quality of meat if they aren't supplemented with grain. But you're feeding them wheat and rapeseed,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's a ration that you guys dole out into these hoop barns, right? And then the chickens can go outside, they can be active all over the pasture, but for the majority of their calories, they're getting it from the feed.
Yeah. 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 For sure.
If you could change one thing about the food system based on everything you've learned with regenerative agriculture, everything you've learned with chicken farming, and then you and I have chatted many times about just the challenges of the farm bill and the agricultural policies in the US. But if you could change one thing right now about the US food system, what would it be?
It probably would be the farm bill. I don't know exactly how. I mean, so California is the world's ninth largest economy, and we are the ninth largest economy. Agriculture is like the second or third largest component of the California economy.
Yeah, I think
It's
we're
way,
like the sixth largest economy now. Like we keep growing up and going up on the list.
yeah, I don't know. The point being is that California grows a lot of agriculture. We make billions of dollars in agriculture, and that the USDA, just about every single crop grown in California is called a specialty crop under the Farm Bill, meaning that those thousands of acres of almonds you drive past, all the salad comes from California, most of the veggies come from California. All of that stuff is specialty, and that the specialty crops in the Farm Bill make up a vanishingly small percentage of what the subsidies go towards. I don't even know. It's like 5, 10, 15% maybe. And so that means that the majority of the on-farm subsidies go to corn and soy. They're majority. Details are a little off, and like I said, that creates corn that is abnormally cheap, and it is non-human consumable. So you have to convert that corn to something humans can eat, and the only way to do that is run it through an animal. Most animals are not designed to eat that much corn. Chickens to some degree, pigs to some degree, cows absolutely not. And so if we take all of the subsidies out of corn and out of soy and let them reflect their true production cost, everything that eats a lot of corn and soy gets really expensive all of a sudden. So that would be one thing I would do kind of on the, I guess, call it the supply side. And then I said, you can only say I can have one. I'm going to give myself two. And then on the other side, we need people to understand that their food dollars absolutely matter, both for the type of production, food, agriculture system they want to see, and also for their own health. That buying the cheapest food is buying, this is just not good. Your body will, your health will eventually catch up to your food buying habits. And so I don't know how to do it, but if people knew how to feed themselves better, were given knowledge how to feed themselves better, and that all of the cheap corn-based products were actually appropriately priced, there would be this like instantaneous change. That'd be like, oh, that salad really is probably not so bad, because all of a sudden my chips went from pretty darn cheap to now like, oh, they're pretty super expensive. Yeah. I was like, that's a big old change. Now that salad looks cheaper, and I also know it's better for me. Right? So that's my magic wand.
I love it. I'm with you. I'll join that utopia when you put it together, all right? How does regenerative agriculture play a role in the future of our agricultural system?
Well, so conventional agriculture is living on borrowed time. I don't know if that's 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, but that is a finite production system. Where the cliff is, I can't precisely predict, but it is not thousands of years away. It is decades away, maybe a century if they're really lucky. And so the regenerative agriculture in some form or other is going to become agriculture. Because really, if you look at agriculture over a long enough time horizon, that what we call conventional agriculture is not conventional. This is kind of some of the organic people get all upset about. They're like, why do we have to be certified organic? We're just doing what we've always done forever, all the way back to, the first agricultural settlements. It's only these damn synthetic guys for the past 60 years who have been like doing all this crap. Like, they're not conventional. They should be certified.
I love it.
Certified chemical, not certified organic. And so if you look at a long enough time horizon, you're going to see the synthetic industrial agriculture is just a little blip. It's going to be like, wow, this is really great. Oh my God, this is terrible. And it's dead and it's gone. And that regenerative agriculture in some form or other is going to be just agriculture.
How does that change happen in the farming community?
So farmers are, this is the amusing way to characterize them. Farmers want to make money. Once the dollar signs point towards regenerative agriculture as making them more money, done. they have very few cultural hangups that will prevent them from doing whatever makes them a lot of money. Because here's the thing, that farmers, ranchers, we have a huge amount of capital deployed. Like, our ranch, it's a pointless number because we're never going to sell it, but it's worth millions of dollars. And we are doing all sorts of crazy agricultural, unique, high value, high margin. And I still, my wife still has to work in town because I don't make a money just on my own. Right. And I am very representative of pretty much every agricultural guy you'll ever come across, that the wife supports the husband so he can farm. Right. So by buying that cheap stuff at the grocery store, you are sending, I mean, this is a guilt trip for you to spend more money. You buying cheap corn based products are making my wife have to work. She doesn't like you. That's totally not true. She likes you very much. But that is what is going to change the system. And it's already happening. Organics have been growing as a percentage like 20 to 30% year over year for the past 15 or 20 years. Are there problems with organic certifications? Yes. Is it better than not certified? 100% yes. It's directionally the right way to be going. So farmers are seeing that growing organic makes them more money, and they're shifting from conventional to organic. The amount of interest in regenerative agriculture is just kind of mind-boggling. I mean, it's still, as a percentage basis, really small, but you're seeing it in kind of some mainstream farm trade journals where they're talking about regenerative agriculture. And it's just like, well, that's really weird. Not where you'd expect to see it. Going back to the fact that I didn't know that my soul lived here at Big Bluff Ranch until I went away to college. That's the truth for just about any farmer you will poke. We're all screwed in the head, but there's something so innate to human nature and speaks so deeply to us where we are connected to the ground. No farmer is going to go out there and be like, hey, I just want to rape and pillage and take whatever I can out of this land, turn it into a piece of garbage and move on. No one's doing that. Every single farmer out there is trying to take care of the animals, trying to take care of their land, and doing it the best they can while not going out of business. And the not going out of business is incredibly hard. Of the dollar that you spend on food, farmer gets like certainly less than 15 cents. 15%. It's probably even less than that. It might be 5. I can't remember. It's a small fraction. And so these farmers are like, we can't take the risk of having 2 to 3 down years. That would put us out of business. We can't afford the risk because, we have a huge mortgage on the property. We have a huge line of credit that we have to pay off every year. So farming is a miserable business to be in. Like, it is. If anyone out there thinks like, oh, I want to be a farmer, like, good on you. But yeah, if you're just looking from the dollars and cents, like, probably you can make a lot more money somewhere else.
So do you want your kids to take over Big Bluff Ranch when you're ready to retire?
Of course. Hey, I'm never going to retire, just like my dad. My dad's outside right now. I hear him driving around on the tractor. I'm like, what are you doing? I don't know. But so I'm going to be just like my dad, and it would be an amazing thing to be able to turn this over to the next generation. My daughter, 8th grade, and at the high school orientation, they were talking about college degrees. And she's like, oh, I just learned something called agricultural business degree. I want to do that. I was like, oh, that is super cool. Because she's been saying, for years, she's going to come back and manage the ranch. I'm like, yeah, of course you will. But she might actually do it.
Well, I saw it. I saw how beautiful it is there at Big Bluff Ranch. And I don't want to romanticize it. I hear what you're saying. Farming and ranching is tough work. And you guys, it's the soil's in your blood in the sense of what keeps you coming back to do this kind of work and raise amazing animals that are fantastic quality. I definitely want to encourage folks to check out Big Bluff Ranch. How can they get your chicken?
You can buy direct from us, bigbluffranch.com. And then we have a number of retail partners up and down the West Coast. Most of them are online and could ship to you. So bigbluffranch.com is your first bet. And if that doesn't work for you, just reach out, Tyler at bigbluffranch.com, and I'll tell you who to buy it from locally.
Awesome. Tyler, thank you so much for spending time with us today here on Enlightened Omnivore Podcast. I hope you come back again. I feel like we just scratched the surface, pun intended, of all of the things that we could talk about with chicken. But thanks again for sharing your thoughts, for giving your vision. And I hope you're right. I hope regenerative agriculture is the future and that we're just on the front end of commodity agriculture's demise here.
No, it's absolutely fun. Have me back anytime. Maybe we should start our own podcast.
Hey, let's think about it. All right, man. Take care. And that wraps up another episode of Enlightened Omnivore. A special thanks to all my subscribers for listening this week. You can all read more about everything omnivorous on my weekly Substack newsletter found at enlightenedomnivore.substack.com. Join me next month as we continue to uncover the stories behind our food and the new ways we can live sustainably together. Thank you for tuning in. This is Steve Sabaker reminding you to savor every bite and eat mindfully. Until next time, keep it balanced and stay enlightened.